Welcome to the Existential Empath Podcast. My name is Tanya, and I am an intuitive empath. My intention is to share valuable tips, tools, and techniques that I have learned so you can tap into your own inner healer naturally and intuitively. Welcome back, everyone. Today I have guest Laurin Wittig. Laurin is an intuitive healer, mentor, founder of the HeartLight Wise Woman Circles, and an award-winning novelist of the Guardians of the Targe Trilogy. Her passion is to help women recognize and unleash their innate wisdom so they can bring information consciously forward into their lives with confidence and joy. She accomplishes this through her HeartLight Wellness practice, where she provides intuitive energy healing and spiritual mentoring. Laurin is also the host of the Curiously Wise podcast. Welcome, Laurin. It's a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Thank you, Tanya, so much for having me. I love doing this. I love talking about this juicy stuff.
I do too. And so you and I are going to talk about some juicy stuff. Heal your stories, transform your life, remembering your innate wisdom within. And so, Laurin, I'm noticing a theme this week, and that theme is stories. And the guest I had on yesterday, we ended up talking about stories as well. And so, the stories that we tell ourselves and others, and how those directly impact how we feel about ourselves and how our lives are playing out. And so, Laurin, why are the stories that we tell ourselves and others so important to our healing work?
Well, this has been something really part of my journey because I put myself in a victim mode most of my life. But those were just the stories I was telling myself about the situation. And I had a lot of fears, a lot of lack of confidence, a lot of people pleasing because of the stories I was telling about those relationships or the situation. Now, I'm not saying that there weren't some traumatic things going on in my very dysfunctional family of birth,
Yeah, because those stories have to start somewhere, right?
They start somewhere, but then we keep telling them, and we tell them, and we tell them, and we share them with our friends, and we embellish about them. We embellish them, and for me, so many of them were based in childhood and teens that I don't think the context was even still the same. I was telling the story, but the seed of it was long forgotten. And so I'm carrying around these stories that are making me ill, physically ill, that are making me somewhat dysfunctional in my in the relationships in my own family my family of choice, but also with my parents as they aged and really colored how I saw the world. And so I, dealt with some depression at times, and I just wasn't a very happy person for a lot of my life. And that's really kind of a sad way to go through life. But once I realized that there were stories involved, and I know how to plot a story. I know what a story needs to make it a good story.
Yeah, you're an author.
I'm a novelist. I actually had to learn all that, even though I carry all that around in me, just because we do. But once I realized that, I could change the story. I can revise the story. I can let go of the story. And that came through a lot of work, personal work. And I worked with several intuitive healers who were really changed my life very rapidly. And what I learned is that if we can bring those stories that we're telling ourselves, which we usually don't even realize we're telling ourselves.
Yeah, they're subconscious sometimes.
They're subconscious. We've lived with them so long, they've become beliefs.
And habits.
And habits and expectations about, you meet somebody new and all these old stories are going on that are coloring how you expect to interact with that person. Once you can bring them up and look at them consciously, which usually requires some help. A good journal is great for it, but I'm an advocate of working with somebody who can go, that's just a story you're telling yourself.
And you're like, oh, I guess it is. Well, where did that story begin? And why are you holding on to that story? Laurin, why do we hold on to our stories? I'm sure there's a variety of reasons why we hold on to them.
I know for me, and for most of my clients where we do this kind of work, the stories actually served us in the beginning. Like I said, I grew up in a very dysfunctional family. Anybody who's heard me talk knows my dad was an alcoholic. My mom was a narcissist. And there was a lot of trauma. Oh yeah. And there was a lot of trauma in their families, previous generations and stuff. So there was a lot of crap going on in there. And for me, the safest thing to do was not be seen. Mm-hmm. So that kept me small. It kept me from claiming the things I was really good at. It kept me from building confidence around being really good at things because I would get gaslit about it. Yeah. So there was a good reason for me to create this story that, some relationships are not safe because they weren't. But as I grew up, I'm no longer a child. I'm no longer dependent on my parents to take care of me. I'm no longer dependent on them to be in their good graces. I have built a great life. I have a beautiful family, all of these things that wasn't serving me anymore, but it was still affecting me physically. Yeah. And that's what I find is really interesting is that we hold on to these things. And if we don't deal with them, they become toxic. I mean, they may have been useful, but they become toxic. And if we don't figure out that that is the source of our physical problems, we can go to all the doctors we want to. It's not going to resolve. We might get some pain relief, but you're not going to get rid of it.
Yeah, because we've created momentum behind those stories. And I know oftentimes, it sounds like in your story, you were creating protection around yourself a bit. And I'm recognizing that with a lot of my clients who come to me for weight loss.
Yes.
And that's a story, right? So let's talk about that because we create that protective layer around ourselves when we're young, because you obviously, having an alcoholic father and a narcissistic, mother.
It was fun times.
You created this beautiful, energetic cushion of energy around you. And then in the physical body, it can manifest, not saying it did in your situation, but it can manifest as weight, as, putting that layer around us. So let's talk about some of the ways that our stories can affect us physically.
Yeah. Well, I have experienced the weight issue, not in extreme cases, but in towards the end of my mother's life, I was really stressed out and very actively protecting myself from her. Dementia and narcissism, not a good combo.
Oh gosh. You don't remember her narcissism.
So I put on a lot of weight. I was going through menopause and that stuff too. There's a lot of stress, but I put on a lot of weight, but I was also consciously energetically at that point, protecting myself from her. Now, the other thing that I did, so weight is one, and then that's a very common one, especially for women, I think more than men.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, we got to protect ourselves from the world, and we physically create that boundary. But also for me, a lot of mine were around fear. A lot of my issues were around fear, and fear will often manifest as allergies.
Oh, interesting.
Yes. And so I had horrendous allergies my whole life. Mm-hmm. And they got worse as I got older. Eventually I went and got the tests for shots from an allergist. And I went into anaphylaxis in the doctor's office while I was getting tested. Now, anaphylaxis is a body-wide reaction, right? Mm-hmm. Ended up in the ICU overnight. And I was like, okay, we got to find something else. This is not working. And that's when I learned from an intuitive healer that my belief system was that I had to be afraid of everything.
Yeah, you were in that fight, flight, or freeze response.
Exactly. But that's all of that. My stories told me that I had to be afraid of everything. I had to always be on guard. I had to be careful. What do allergies do? They keep you from going out in the world. Yeah. They keep you with some reason why you can't do this, or you can't go there, or you can't interact in this way. Mm-hmm. And working with an intuitive healer, I got rid of my allergies in one session, but she had to bring that belief up, which was all my stories. Uh-huh. And help me clear that, help me understand it first, and then help me let go of it. and give me some tools to follow up. Because every now and then I get a little itchy nose and I go, okay, what's going on here?
Yep. I do that too. It's like, okay, what's going on in my body? Right? What is the belief system behind this? What is the emotion behind this? And I start muscle testing. I'm like, where am I at? So
I get my pendulum out. That's my
which is very similar. It's all tuning into the subconscious.
Exactly. Exactly. So yeah, there's a lot of ways physically that we protect ourselves. I see so many women with knee issues. And, knees are about flexibility and about being able to stand up for yourself and move forward in the world. And that's so, there's so many women that I see, and I have a little bit of that, and I haven't figured out that story yet, but it was pretty severe, knee replacements and all this stuff in their, 50s. And that's just crazy because there's a story there. There's something that could have been done sooner to let go of it, but now you haven't let go of the story, but you've replaced the knee. So now where's it going to go?
Yeah. And looking at from the masculine and feminine energy too, the right side of the body is the masculine energy and the left side is the feminine. So you ask yourself, well, which side do I have a knee problem on? Is it my masculine energy? Am I being a little too aggressive or assertive or domineering or taking too much action? Or is it my feminine side? Am I not receiving? Am I not allowing? Am I not letting things flow in? So it's kind of funny. It's just this layered effect when we're working in the energetic and emotional bodies, right?
Yeah. And one of the interesting things about stories that I learned years ago is that we are actually, our brains are wired to learn from stories. And I'm sure that comes from, evolution. We sat around the fire and told stories, and that's how we learned things, and that's how we remembered history. I have, the Scottish background. And so the bards were responsible for memorizing the history of the clan or the history of the country, or, and that comes out in stories and songs and all kinds of ways. But so we were wired to receive things by stories because it helps us remember. If we can tell a story about something, we're more likely to remember than if it's 6 numbers in a row and that aren't really attached to something.
Yeah. And that kind of anchors us into the past when it doesn't allow us to live in that now moment, which is really, that's what we talked about yesterday on my show, is just there, the past is the past and the future is what we create in this now moment. And, letting go of the stories allows us to create what will eventually happen in the future.
Right. You can actually rewrite the story. You can let it go completely, or you can rewrite it. And that's where I think perspective comes in, because a lot of times for me, and I speak a lot from my personal experience because that's the most visceral experience I have of this stuff, but I see it with my clients too. But we're so wrapped up in those stories that we are telling ourselves, and our ego is supporting them to keep us safe, and if you can find a little space, you just create a little space between the story and you now hear this person you are in this moment, you can often say, yeah, that doesn't serve me. Or, and what I like to do is go, it did serve, usually it did serve you at some point. That's why you created the story, but it's not serving me now. And so I can say, thank you. I'm grateful to you. Thank you for helping me, maneuver through the world, but it's time to let you go. And literally you can release this stuff that quickly, but you got to get the distance from it. So that's, go ahead.
Oftentimes those stories are created from a child's perspective too, right? And here we are in our 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, living out these lovely stories that we created when we were like 5,
Exactly. And think about it. I mean, I have 2 kids, they're in their 30s now, but when they're 2, every trauma is every little thing can be a trauma, right? When they're 5, the first day of school might instill some story in their head about school, and then they carry that forward with them. You look back at it as an adult and you go, well, that was a silly thing to get upset about. And yet you've been carrying it around your whole life.
But unconsciously,
right? Yeah, absolutely. Our subconscious is really powerful, and it's subconscious. So it's hard to get a handle on things.
So let's dive into that, Laurin. How do we uncover or reveal those hidden stories that could be causing us pain and suffering and things that we just don't need to be dealing with anymore, because it's something that maybe we've been carrying since early childhood.
Yeah. Yeah. And it takes some bravery, I'm going to say, to do that, some courage, because it means digging into things that we don't want to see. That's why they're in the subconscious. We want to leave them out there where we don't have to deal with them anymore. You know?
Put them in a file.
Put them in a file, put it in the drawer, close the drawer, lock it up, leave it there, you know? But there's a few things. For me, I often and almost always suggest journaling. That's how I got my start in figuring out what was going on with me when I was in my 20s. And I tend to journal a lot when things aren't going well and not much when things are. You know, so it's usually including me.
It's a technique, and it works for many people. Yes.
Right. And journaling is a word that triggers some people, but it's just getting shit out of your head and onto the page. You know?
It's moving energy is what it's
moving energy. And Julia Cameron wrote a book called The Artist's Way. And in the writing community, when I was first starting out a lot of years ago, it was a big thing, because it was about how do you recover from some of the writer's block kinds of things, that sort of thing. But she has something that she suggests you do every day. And that is you handwrite 3 pages first thing in the morning, and you just let it fall out of your head. And if you get stuck, you just write, I don't know what to write. I don't know what to write. I don't know what to write, until something comes up. And it gets that shit out of your head. I hope it's okay to use that word.
No, that's good. It's in the morning too, when you wake up, you're in that theta state, and you're just in those brainwave states that are in tune with the subconscious. So it's good to do that first thing in the morning, or even right before bed.
Yeah. She calls them morning pages, because she suggests you do them first thing in the morning. And I did that for a while. And it's just the thing that because I got sort of analytical about it at one point, which is not my normal mode, but it's like, why is journaling so powerful? And what I realized is that it physically creates a space between you and that story. You've taken it out of your body and you've put it on the page. So now you've got some choices about it. You can read it over and over and wallow in it. I don't suggest you do that.
Continue to read your story.
Yes. Just let's reinforce that story some more. Or you can literally practice rewriting the story. What if this had happened instead of that? How would I feel now? Ooh, I feel better now. Okay, I'm going to rewrite the story that way. That's the kind of little things you can do. Or you can create a whole little ritual around it and burn it, which I love, because and when I say a ritual, I almost always include gratitude in it, because no matter how bad something was, you gained something from it. Wisdom, experience, just knowledge, all kinds of things that we gain, even probably more so from those things we don't like in our lives than the things we do. And so I really just getting that perspective is so hard. So on your own, journaling is my number one suggestion.
Yeah. And in following your intuition and just listening to your body, listening to yourself, I think that that gets overlooked sometimes, because we're a society of distractions and chaos and fight, flight, or freeze all the time.
Right. And I often say that your body's a communicator. It's trying to tell you what it needs.
It's screaming at you sometimes.
Sometimes,
back pain, it's screaming at you.
Yes. Yeah. It's so and you're right. We just will take an aspirin, or we'll go to the doctor and get some medication that will mask the symptoms. But it's like the knee thing that I was talking about is, if you don't dig into why is my knee hurting? I sometimes will put my hands on my knee, because I have a right knee that comes and goes. It's nothing terrible, and I have yet to figure out the story. It'll come when it's ready.
Yeah.
I know there's one in there. I don't know what it is. I know when it started, because I started having knee issues when I was about 13 years old. So I know when it started, but I have that story has not been successfully unleashed yet. But I will put my hands on my knee and get quiet and just ask my knee what it needs. And that's a clue to what the problem is, right?
Yeah.
And you'd be surprised. You have to trust that whatever floats into your head is true. But it's surprising how many people I've taught that, and they're just shocked at how well that works.
Yeah, it's that concept of body talk, talking to your body and allowing the information to come back to you, because we're in this vessel, we're in this avatar, we're in this body, whatever we want to call it, but it's conscious, right?
Yes.
And
right.
we can consciously communicate with our body, and the body is so literal in how it speaks to us. It's like, okay, I have an elbow pain. Okay, well, what does your elbow do? It's bends, it's flexible. Where are you not bending in your life? Where are you not being flexible in your life? Very similar to the knee, right? And so, when you really look at what area you're struggling in the body, ask yourself, what does that area of the body do for me? Yes. And then apply it to your reality, apply it to the stories that you may be telling yourself.
Right. Right. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm thinking right now, I really need to dig into 13 and see what happened that year.
Yeah.
Because it was a big year
12,
for me.
Maybe 12, 13, 14.
Yeah.
Dig into those early teen years, which, gosh, those are some tough years too. I have cleared so much from that time, between the time of 12 and say 16. Oh my gosh, so much happens in those years.
And so I just want to point out for those listening that I just exhibited a very real example of what resistance looks like. Because I know this stuff.
Yeah.
And I have dug into this knee, but obviously I haven't dug in specifically enough. And that just came to me while we were talking. It's like, oh, wait, I said that I was around 13. Oh, wait.
Yeah. And there could be something there that happened that your subconscious is like, ooh, we don't want to go there yet. That's a tough time. And so, sometimes that's why, all the information is within us and we can dive in and heal, but there are times when going outside of ourselves to find another healer can act as a fulcrum. It can act as, because I know that there's times when I'm blocked and I can't get to it, but then I'll work with someone and I'm like, that was so easy. And it's like, because my subconscious wasn't allowing me in.
Right. Right. And often we're not ready to deal with whatever that is. And so that's ourselves protecting ourselves. Yeah. But usually if you're aware of it being the problem, then, that I know there's a problem in my right knee.
It happened around 13.
It happened around 13. Huh. Okay. Yeah. And I have several people that I do trades with who are energetic healers. And so, yeah, it's like, I've asked them about it in the past, but I don't think I was ready for it, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And just talking about it right now, I know there's some forgiveness in there that needs to happen.
That's funny. So there you go. Ho'oponopono. I just did a show on the Hawaiian practice of forgiveness and looking in the mirror and tapping and forgiving ourselves. And, so it's funny how it comes up through these things. I'll be doing a podcast like this and then I get off of it and I'm like, why am I crying? I must have healed something, with that person. And I moved things through because it's all energy, right? It's all energy. And all of the wisdom and knowledge is within us. We just have to, number one, remember that we have this knowledge within us and then figure out how to access it, right? So let's dive into this, Laurin, because, you work with people on how to access the innate wisdom within. And so, how do we access our wisdom? And because our subconscious is, like you said, it's huge, it's vast, it's infinite. There's a lot of information in there.
Oh yeah. And we're also connected to, our higher self and all that stuff. And that's even more wisdom and more information. And I'm not sure I have a specific tool so much as, for me, meditation opened the door. I had to get quiet.
Yeah.
And I get up in the middle of the night sometimes and my brain is going, you got to do this in the morning. You got to do that. So getting quiet in my head is not an easy thing to do. And I think that's true of most of us.
Yes.
But so for me, meditation opened the door because it did allow me to get quiet and it allowed me to do a couple of things. It allowed me to really connect with my spirit guides, which is one of my passions. And that allowed me to have conversations with them eventually. And that allowed me to get perspective and to see that, what I was planning on doing is really, really good. I discern that well. My wisdom around that issue and how I need to approach it is appropriate. You begin to get validation for it.
Yeah. And I know for me, when I feel I feel it like goosebumps in my body.
I do too.
Yes. I'll have a download of information and then boom, goosebumps or teary eyed or just this elation will come over me. And I'm like, that's truth. Because if it's not truth, it doesn't feel that way. It feels weird in my solar plexus, maybe in my stomach, or it doesn't sit right in my heart. And I'm like, that's not it. I'm not feeling that. But your body will tell you when something resonates as truth. And we just, like we talked about earlier, we have to listen to it. We have to tune into our body.
Yeah. I love that you get goosebumps. I get them so much. One of my clients dubbed them the truth bumps.
I love that. I get them all the time. I can tell when there's an energy by me too, because I work a lot with earthbound spirits and I'm like, hey, how you doing? Who's here? I can feel you on my right side, So I think when you learn your clairvoyance, clairsentience, clairaudience, you learn to tune in to your intuition, and you can tap into that innate wisdom and knowledge. I call it the cosmic internet because it's all out there. We just have to, you're like, okay, I want to go search for information in ancient Egypt, okay, maybe I want to go learn about my past lives. Okay. Tune into that. It's all the information is out there. It's just creating a connection with it and receiving the information
and trusting it when you do receive it. That's huge. For me, that was one of the things is like, did I just make that up? And that's where I love things like pendulums or muscle testing, because I would, and I still do it. I get grief from my guides because they're like, you can trust that.
It's like, I always get that too. Muscle testing is just validation. You don't have to rely on it. I'm like, okay.
I'll get my pendulum out. Did I just get that right? They're like, you did.
they're up in your head like, and that's really just us. It's just us telling us.
It's hilarious. I walk around laughing at myself all the time. So
I'm talking to myself all the time. I'm like, the people that are in the 3D reality are probably looking at me like, who is this? Oh, well, I'm receiving a download. It is what it is.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I love it. It's so weird and wonderful and has just improved my life so much since I've connected to all of that. It's been a gift.
I love that. So you help people unleash that information to come through. And so do you recognize a difference between women's wisdom and men's wisdom? Is there a difference between that?
I don't work with a lot of men, not by choice. That's just the way it goes. And I think men are a lot less introspective in general. I know some men that are very introspective, but so they are more, I don't know, they don't seem to have a problem trusting what they believe and think.
They're confident.
Confidence. So I don't think they question it as much as we do.
No, you're right. It could be because they use different hemispheres of the brain, and we're all learning how to balance those hemispheres.
Oh, that's
some of us.
I'm working on that big time right now.
It's like I'm a female, but I was in my masculine energy all the time. So I was using a certain portion of my brain, and now I'm learning how to tap into my feminine energy more. And I think it doesn't really matter what gender you are. It's really more about the energies and learning how to balance them.
Yeah. And I was the opposite. I'm like way over here in the feminine and it's like,
that's probably why you attract more female clients and I attract more male clients. It's really funny.
I strongly believe we attract the clients that we are best in alignment with, that we have the experience and the understanding of. So I get so many people from dysfunctional families, or narcissistic mothers.
But you have knowledge there, right?
I do. I have a lot of knowledge and experience with that. So I can validate, and I can offer alternatives. I can support in ways that I couldn't do for somebody who had an absolutely loving mother and can't figure out why she's got this other problem.
That's foreign to you, right?
I don't know what that looks like.
It's so funny. I mean, we are where we are, and it's all divine timing, right? So,
Right.
I don't know if you recognize this, but you might be struggling with something in your life, and then boom, you have a client appear that's struggling with the same thing, and somehow you miraculously work it out together. And I see this happen a lot with my clients. It's funny because it's just the universe's way of saying, hey, you're in alignment with this, and whether you like it or not, you're going to work through it together. And so it's just really funny how that happens.
Is funny. It is funny. The Wise Women group I ran before the pandemic shut us down, I was going through the end of my mom's life at that point when I started that. And I had a lot of stuff that I needed to talk about. And so I would come up with a theme, for the meeting, and I would throw it out there, and I would, cry my way through it or whatever. And every time there were 4 or 5 people out of like 15 who would come up to me afterward and go, that was exactly what I needed today. So we kind of attract this, and they weren't, we wasn't the same 15 people every time that showed up. So it was, we attract that which we have a resonance with.
Absolutely.
I feel that really strongly. And that's why I believe that's why there's so many different healers out there doing so many different modalities and working with the energies in, their own ways and different ways and some overlapping ways, because there's people out there that need you and your understanding of the masculine mind. There's some that need me and, the understanding of the dysfunctional family, and others who need, somebody who's a type A and trying to figure out how to meditate,
Yeah. And it's like different radio stations, right? It's like, excuse me, you go to someone on 105.4 and then you're like, I did a little work and now I'm on 105.5 and, and that's where we're all working on different frequencies and different vibrations. And so that's why we're attracting, even with my podcast, it's funny, I'll have people booked and then they'll have to reschedule or they'll cancel. And I'm like, oh, I guess they just weren't in alignment this week, whatever. And so when you learn energy and you have a deeper understanding of it, you can't really take it personal because it's all frequency and vibration. And when you're in that flow state, it's that people are flowing in and flowing out, and experiences are flowing in and flowing out. Your healing is flowing in and flowing out. I mean, I sat down the other day to watch a Hallmark movie and I'm just sobbing my eyes out. And I'm like, well, evidently I needed to heal something. And, but then another day I watch Hallmark and I'm laughing, so it really just depends on, where we're at and what frequency and that part of the sifting process, that we go through in healing. Yeah.
And once I really embraced that idea that you're talking about where, well, that was supposed to happen and it didn't. So I guess that was the right thing, in that moment, that wasn't the right, it didn't mesh. Once I really embraced that, boy, I got a lot of, anger or irritation or, that kind of stuff out of my life. It's like, no, it's just the way it was supposed to be. It's fine,
and it's more carefree that way, because when we hold on to, the anger and frustration, all it's doing is creating resistance, within us. And it's not allowing the energy to flow in that is supposed to be flowing in.
Right. Plus then you spread that anger energy around, and that's not a nice thing to do.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
Nobody got time for that. No, this energy right here, this is fun to spread around.
This is fun energy. We're laughing about dysfunctional families. We're laughing about the way we grew up, but these are stories, and we can transcend these. We can transform these to make, our lives better. And so, I think the moral of this whole thing is to let go of the stories that aren't serving us anymore. And we have the choice to create our new reality, right? Through our new stories that we share and that we tell. And my story right now is that I am an extremely prosperous and influential podcaster that is influencing millions of people all over the world in the comfort of my own home. That's what I added at the end, because I don't want to travel around and do it. I want to sit here in the comfort of my own home and inspire people. And so that's my current story that I am telling myself and telling the world right now.
That's a great story. My story right now is that I am courageous and confident. That's the story I'm writing right now.
That's your Scottish background right there.
That's too. My Scottish background. it's the antithesis of the way I felt 20 years ago. The work I've done has gotten me where, yeah, I am courageous and confident, and I'm owning it. I love it. And yeah. And I'm like you, I love this work. I love being able, because I have a podcast too. I love these conversations and letting that ripple out to the world. It's just amazing.
Oh, it's amazing. So let's talk a little bit, Laurin, about the services you provide and your podcast.
Yeah. So I provide, client services one-on-one, and I do most of those at a distance. The pandemic gave me a lot of practice at that. And I describe myself kind of like a jazz musician when it comes to how I do my healing work. I am intuitive first. I have been trained in Reiki and esoteric healing and various other modalities. I do shamanic journeying. But when I work with somebody, I start with intuition, and then I just grab whatever other modality is needed in the moment. So sometimes I'm like, oh, we're going to do a little Reiki now, or, oh, I got to get my esoteric healing stuff out and let me do that. Sometimes it's a little bit of, I'm not a sound healer, but I have, a singing bowl. And sometimes I'm in, it's like, oh, I got to get my rattle out and I'm going to do a little singing.
Yeah.
So I do that. And I love that work. That really fills my soul and my heart up. I have added spirituality mentoring because I had a number of people come and say, I don't want healing. I just want to talk to you. I want.
That's funny. I've had people say that to me too. And I'm like, yeah, really? Okay.
I was like, okay.
I'll listen. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And then,
I'll listen.
Yeah, I know and I actually love it because it's this kind of information that they're looking for generally is that spirituality aspect to life, and how do you bring it in and work with it and heal with it. I literally am just releasing, I just was finished polishing up my first video course before I got on this call. And it's called Communicating with Your Spirit Guides. And it is definitely a heart project of mine. It's a video course, so you do it at your own pace, and that will be going live in the next week. This is first week in February, 2023, since these things are evergreen. And so I'm doing that, and the podcast. That's the other thing, which is taken up a lot of my time lately, which I love. It's called Curiously Wise. And I recently received from my guides a tagline for it. So it's not quite so generic. So it's Spiritually Wise, Practical Spirituality in Action.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, I got chills. I got goosebumps when I received that. It was like, so, and it's these kinds of conversations. I'm talking a lot with other energy workers. I have some really interesting people that have found me that I never would have thought would be a good fit for it, who turn out to be incredibly interesting conversations. I started in last April, so almost a year now. Right. And and it's going gangbusters, and I love it. Oh my gosh, I have so much fun.
I do too. I love, it's like I'm just having a conversation with people and recording it and then putting it out into the universe. And it's so fun. I started mine about a year ago in February, I believe.
Oh, okay. So there we go.
I'm right there with you, and it's going gangbusters. I'm really excited too. And I love to see where it reaches. I'm like, ooh, I'm in Japan. Ooh, I'm in Iceland. Ooh, I'm in, it just is so fun.
I went to, I can't remember what the site is, Pod Charts or something. And because somebody else had said that there was, and I'm like, I want to go see what I'm not a member, so I don't get to see much, but I was 174th in alternative health in Vietnam.
That is so cool. That is cool. I think I ranked like 44 in Finland for self-improvement. And I'm like, oh, I love Finland. I had visited there several years ago, and it was one of my favorite countries. And so I was giving a shout out to all the Finnish people out there.
There you go. Yeah, it's amazing how I've interviewed people in India and Australia and England, and I don't know where all else, but and of course a lot from Canada in the last year. So I don't know why all of a sudden I'm connected to Canada, but because I'm in the US.
A lot of dysfunctional families up there, maybe. I don't know.
I don't know. They're lovely people. I love having the conversations with them, but it tickles me, and mostly out in Vancouver. So Vancouver must be a very cool place.
Yes, that's just north of me. I'm in North Idaho, and Vancouver is just north of me. And Yeah, it's so fun. And I like you. I just love, I feel like I'm traveling the world every time I do a podcast with someone. And what a blessing this is. And, Laurin, this has been such a fun talk and such a fun show. And I'm really excited for both of our stories because I can see our stories are creating amazing things, amazing ripple effects out into the world. And I appreciate, you sharing your knowledge and your wisdom with us today. And thank you for the energy that you're putting out into the world. It's absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much.
I just got goosebumps. So yeah, you're welcome.
Yes, thank you. I know. That was your higher self. Saying, receive it. Just
good job. Good job.
You deserve to navigate your life in alignment with health, happiness, and abundance. To learn more about the services that I provide, including Beyond Quantum Healing Hypnosis, EFT tapping, and the Emotion Code, visit my website at www.theexistentialempath.com.